What up, nerds, and welcome to Takadana Talks. I'm Elle, and before I get into my raised parents theory, I want to get a few things out of the way first. For one, I feel like it's important to note that a lot of the buzz around raised parentage was manufactured by the fandom rather than it being a question that was asked outright or even really implied in The Force Awakens. I feel like a lot of people went into The Last Jedi expecting some big reveal in the form of raised parents being Skywalkers, Solos, Kenobis, etc., and feeling very let down when that didn't happen. To those people, I urge you to rewatch The Force Awakens with a critical eye and really pay attention to what is actually implied about raised parents and what questions the movie raises, because in truth, we don't see a lot. What we actually see is, 1, several moments that show that Rey is waiting for her family to return to Jakku, and 2, a flashback in which a young Rey is screaming at a ship to come back as she is being dragged away by Unkar Plutt. Now, I totally get why people did draw the conclusion that Rey's parents were going to be established characters. The parallels between her and Luke should be apparent to any human with 2 working eyes and an ounce of critical thinking skills. And since Luke's parents were a huge part of his character arc in the original trilogy, of course people are going to think that Rey's will be too, and in the same way. But Rey is not Luke, and we shouldn't expect her to be. She's her own character with, yes, a lot of similarities to Luke, but that doesn't mean she has to check every box on his character sheet. And her parents do matter to her character arc, but that would be true whether they are somebody or not. Her relationship with them seems to have a lot more to do with her own internal feelings of abandonment rather than any external conflict that has arisen thus far in the sequel trilogy. The second thing I want to make you aware of is that I do believe Kylo Ren was being honest in the throne room scene near the end of The Last Jedi. I know I brought that scene up in my last video, so I won't go into the reasons I think it's not a manipulation, but when Kylo Ren tells Rey he knows who her parents are, he doesn't actually tell her. Rather, he leads her to admit to herself what she knows, or at least believes to be true, that her parents were nobody. This leads me to believe that what Kylo Ren saw through the Force bond came from her mind rather than some cosmic truth. Thus, it's hard to determine its accuracy because she herself does not know. And I do like the Rey nobody theory. I think it's a much more impactful message to send to young children that you can be great no matter where you came from rather than you have to be the child of somebody important to be important yourself. That said, my theory is not that her parents were some big named characters that even the most casual Star Wars fan would recognize, nor do I think that they were random junk traders who had no involvement in the story whatsoever during the original trilogy. My theory actually hinges on the Battle of Jakku. So for those of you who may not know, the Battle of Endor at the end of Episode 6 was the big turning point in the Galactic Civil War, but the Battle of Jakku was the actual final battle, the true last nail in the coffin for the Empire. According to the first Aftermath novel and an excerpt from the upcoming novel Last Shot, it took place about 9 months after the end of the original trilogy and was actually going on as Ben Solo was being born. The Battle of Jakku has not been mentioned in the saga films, but it is canon, and it's pretty easy to make the assumption that that's where all the Imperial ships and weaponry on Jakku in The Force Awakens come from. So what I think happened is that Rey's parents were members of the Imperial army who survived the battle and ended up stranded on Jakku. It would then make sense that, since they had worked for the now-dead Empire, the surviving Imperials would have no resources to help them get off-world. It seems logical that there would be at least one instance of survivors pairing off and eventually having a kid. And if you look at where Rey lives on Jakku, it fits in pretty well with this theory. For one, we never see her on screen with any other humans on Jakku with the exception of Finn. Everyone who appears to be a regular at Nema Outpost is either an alien, a droid, or covered in such a way that we can't tell what they are. And while there obviously were humans on Jakku in Lor San Tekka's village, that seemed to be pretty far from Rey's home, Nema Outpost, in the Imperial Junkyard, considering the fact that it took BB-8 a whole night and a day to get from there to where he first met Rey. Meanwhile, Rey literally lived inside an AT-AT, which is symbolic in and of itself, but we can safely assume that it has not moved from where it broke down. Therefore, it's very likely that she lived very close to the junkyard where she did her scavenging. This is where her parents would have ended up after the battle. And I'm not saying that this 100% proves that her parents were not originally from Jakku, but if they were, it would make a lot more sense for her to have grown up in a human village even if they were garbage parents who abandoned her. Some other person would have taken her in or tried to save her from being sold to Unkar Plutt. but nobody did. To me, that means her parents were somehow removed from the human villages on Jakku, which would make sense if they were from elsewhere in the galaxy. My second reason is more from a storytelling standpoint rather than a basis in plot, and that is that it adds to the already established elements of Rey's character in relation to Kylo Ren. Rey and Kylo Ren are established character foils with a healthy dose of yin and yang symbolism. The message that they are equals and opposites in the Force comes up over and over again, both with visual cues and with direct quotes, such as Snoke's whole "darkness rises and light to meet it" speech. And while Kylo Ren is a dark side user, we all know that he was born to the light. So wouldn't it make sense that Rey would be the opposite, a light side user who was born to the dark? I also think this theory fits in pretty well with the flashback we saw in The Force Awakens with Rey as a kid, which appears to be when her parents flew away in a ship after having sold her to Unkar Plutt. In this scene, she appears to be about 6 or 7 years old, and when you consider that Kylo Ren is canonically 10 years older than her, it would be around the same time that he burned down Luke's Jedi temple and fled to join the dark side. It would then be possible that her parents left because they were being called back into service under the First Order, and left her behind so that she wouldn't be drawn into the fight against her will at such a young age. By leaving her on Jakku, they gave her the ability to choose her own side in the war. So yeah, this theory might not be the grandiose reveal that a lot of us wanted after The Force Awakens, but it fits in with the established storyline and adds to Rey's character without overwhelming it. In my opinion, this is the best of both worlds. This has been Talkadonna Talks. Thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you.